It's the special Thanksgiving edition in the United
Woohoo!
States for Remote Ruby. I
Oh,
love these sound effects.
did you add that one?
Yeah, I added that one.
That one's a good one.
I need to find some more, but or maybe I don't. This could be like a bad thing.
We'll see.
What's
We'll
up?
see. Oh, not a whole lot. I've been just screencasting all week long, like last week, getting this Stripe course um, revisited and actually going to be extending the course a lot. But it's been just, a lot of work. The first time that I did the course, I think it took me 3 months. So, yeah, I was like, well, I guess this time around, it hasn't taken 3 months, so I shouldn't feel like it's taking too long. But it just, there's just so many little details to cover every time that you go build something. Just a lot of things to understand that you gotta build. That, for example, like if you want to build a subscription or checkout process like Stripe, there's a lot of little details that really make that good to use. And so just lots of little screencast episodes in this course that touch on those various things. And then, of course, as I was recording this, I record an episode and do a few things and then started another example project. And the second time around, I go to grab the Stripe gem and it's a different version number, like a different major version number. And I'm like, uh oh. And so luckily it was them just dropping support for Ruby 2.0. So it wasn't going to affect any of my code or users code or anything like that. It was just like, well, this is a fairly major thing to drop support for, so we're going to do a major version. And then they released like 3 more versions as I was recording too. So it's been funny to watch that, but it's not going to affect anything in there. I really
What a
have.
terrifying feeling that must have been, though, just seeing that like huge number drop.
Yeah, and you're like, oh no, do I have to redo everything now? But that's the beauty of Stripe, and I wanted to touch on that in this episode because, like, man, I always loved Stripe's API, but the recent changes they're making to things are just so good. So, for example, one of the things that was a more of a major breaking change from the previous version of this course is when you want to cancel a subscription, you mark that subscription as cancel at period end. So you effectively now just update it and put a flag on there and says, hey, next time you go to renew this, just cancel it instead. And so that user has the ability to resume their subscription if they change their mind, which is pretty nice. But in the past, you would actually issue a delete on the subscription, which actually it felt okay when I used it before, but now that I'm looking back at that, it was like, yeah, that was definitely wrong. And I think they noticed that and made that adjustment so that, the subscription's still technically active until the end of the period that the user paid for. And so they updated their API to reflect that. And I thought that was really cool. And it doesn't really affect you if you don't upgrade to the API version. So they're super cool at this. Like they record your API version on your account and you choose when you upgrade. So you can already decide how far you want to upgrade and what things you're going to have to worry about. It's so neat.
That's awesome. Before, didn't we have to do like we actually in like the PageM, we made it to where you could just pass it as an argument to cancel at the end of the subscription.
Yeah, so in the past when you would delete a subscription, you would always call delete, and you could optionally pass in cancel it period end, and that would do it. And so that was like, well, it's not really doing a cancellation immediately.
I see what you're saying now.
And so that's why they changed it. And it was like, well, that's pretty cool because to me as a user, it feels way more intuitive now, even though it was just a very tiny change. You basically um, move it to an update instead of a destroy. That's more or less all they did on their end. But for us, it just feels more natural that way because technically the subscription still is active until the end of that period. So Yeah, pretty neat stuff.
Cool. Anything else good?
Oh, I could use a break, so I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving and a holiday weekend and all that. I don't know that I'm going to do any shopping or not. I bought a TV, so that's all about all I'm going to do. But
What size?
75 inch.
Mm,
So it'll be pretty awesome. But, there's like these deals for Black Friday last like 2 weeks, you know?
right.
And so it's like, and especially for something like that, they don't want to have to ship out these giant TVs to the stores and then have customers run around the store with a 75-inch TV. So they do those like ahead of time and it makes it a whole lot easier.
Is
So,
it 4K?
yeah. Can you imagine if a 75-inch TV wasn't 4K? It'd be like blurry.
Yeah. We have a 65 inch 1080, and it's like we got it like 5 years, and it hadn't really bothered me. But then, like, I helped my mother in law set up her 4K, and I was like, everything I love about my TV, I hate now. So
Yeah, see, I go from my 4K monitors on my computer to this like I have a really old, it's like almost 8 years old now, 42-inch TV, and I don't use my TV that much, so I was like, well, I'll just get a decent one this year, and that'll probably last me for quite some time, and I'll just move my TV to some other room and that'll be good enough. So yeah, it's funny like any of the TVs out there, technology's come so far in those like 7 or 8 years that I'm like even the crappiest TVs that are out here that are 4K are like phenomenal, and they're like a decent sized TV is like $300 now. You're like it's so cheap.
yeah. Speaking of Black Friday, don't you have Black Friday sales rolling?
Yeah, good good thing you mentioned that. I would have forgotten, to be honest. Even though I just released it. So yeah, 35% off a Go Rails annual subscription, which is like $45 off the normal price. Woohoo! So yeah, I don't ever do discounts except for Black Friday. So if you're interested in a Go Rails subscription, now's the time to get one.
Well, great. um, cool. I was trying to think.
What have you been
Oh
up to?
man, just working. I worked on Saturday trying to get something at workout. It's just been like I didn't really have to work Saturday, but I really wanted to like get it off my plate. Um, and it's finally like the light at the end of the tunnel. So
Mhm.
like I like opened a PR and then got some feedback that like kind of washed away all the parts of my thinking about this that were blurry, and like I'm like, okay, cool. So that's been about it really. I've been trying to deploy one of my side projects to Hatchbox.
How's that going?
It's good. The problem I'm having is user error. Uh, I'm having a problem with Tailwind being seen, I think, by Post CSS is the problem.
Hmm. Yeah, do you know what the error was or what it was related to? Like, was it a, Webpacker compile problem and then it just spit out some sort of thing, or did it even get that far?
I think it's in Webpacker compile. So the first problem I had, also user related, not Hatchbox related, was that so I'm using Webpacker and I'm just using Stimulus,
Mm-hmm.
and so um, oh, you know what? I did get it deployed. I fixed this problem. Fantastic.
Hey, there you
So the
go.
first problem I had was that I'm not actually using any like JavaScript in the asset pipeline.
Uh-huh.
Um, but for some reason, it was yelling at me that in order to use ES6, I needed to change something.
Oh yeah, the uglifier thing.
Yeah, and
Or
I was like, but I'm not doing anything with it anyway. So like, you can let me pull that project up.
Yeah, there's been so many people with issues with Webpacker that I have seen a bunch of things that are like, for some reason, if you don't have the bin yarn bin stub, it like won't even attempt to run yarn to install packages. So some people don't have that file for whatever reason. I don't even know how you lose that file. So uh,
I,
they were missing it, and it took me like 2 hours to track that down. And then I was like, "Hey, try putting this file in." And then they go and do it, and then they're like, "Redeploy." And I forgot to mention that Git will actually keep track of executable flags on files. So you actually also need to make that, an executable. So then that was like, and this guy's like across the world. So he'll message me while I'm sleeping. I'll reply when he's sleeping. And then it just takes like multiple days for us to go back and forth and try and get that fixed. It's so funny. And it's like, of course, it's not really my problem for Hatchbox, but like, look, you're not going to enjoy using Hatchbox if you can't get your app deployed to it. So I
right.
have seen pretty much, I feel like at this point, I've seen all of the common deployment errors that you could see or ever imagine with Webpacker or whatever. It's been a lot of stuff.
So the problem I was having in like your production RB file, the JS compressor by default is just set to uglifier as like a string. And what you have to change it to is like you have to actually instantiate uglifier and then give it harmony true.
Yeah, I have seen that. I think it's something I don't as far as I know, I don't believe that Webpacker uses that. So I'm kind of curious why yours would need that.
Yeah, like I do have. I'm looking. So like I do have like JavaScript files in there that just got like auto generated, but they don't use any ES6 because they're empty. So
Hmm.
I,
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I ran into when I was doing the Stripe course, like I ran into Webpacker. I'm using the latest stable version, which is 3.5, and the JavaScript, if you grab it from Stripe's docs, uses ES6 if you grab their like JavaScript next example code. But the problem was like if you used async in your code, it would just like blow up, and it would give you this weird like regenerator runtime is not defined, and you're like, what the heck is that? So I googled it, and then eventually came across something that was just like, oh yeah, just import Babel hyphen polyfill, and you're good to go. And I was like, okay, but what is this? Why? Like I've never seen that before, and no explanation really. So it worked, it fixed the problem, but I don't know entirely why that syntax that I had through that issue, and the error didn't seem to be relevant to that. So I don't know, lots to learn with JavaScript and all of that good stuff.
yeah, the actual like Ruby part was fine. The problem I had with it not seeing Tailwind is because you save it as a dev dependency.
Uh-huh.
So in package JSON, it's under dev dependencies versus just like dependencies.
Uh-huh.
And so I guess it doesn't actually load when it's compiling it for production for some
Oh
reason.
yeah, because it's in production mode when it's compiling. Because it's
Yeah.
not necessarily, like the JavaScript compilation steps, and that Webpacker runs don't necessarily match up what maybe an Express like Node developer would normally do. So it probably I've always actually added Tailwind as a regular dependency, not a dev dependency. So that I haven't seen that myself, but it does make sense that that might be one of those things like, your dev group in your gem file doesn't exist on production. Like those gems never get installed. So I would assume it's kind of the same situation there.
Yeah. So it's just trial and error. It was really fun to use. The besides the deployment problem, the only other like problem I had was I wasn't just like I wasn't thinking. So like I created a cluster and I was like, okay, where's my app? How do I deploy it? Not thinking that I have to go into the cluster and create an app. Like
Yeah.
I just provisioned a server and was like, okay, work, which the server had no code or anything. So,
Yeah. I need to work on the UI for all of that and make it a little bit more of a step by step thing. Cause like once the cluster gets provisioned, like I should have a big thing that's like, okay, deploy an app, and it's a big button that you click on that is obvious. But there's so many details of like the back end that I have to spend time on that is just really tough to keep up with the good UI on the front end. The design is what I'm not good at, so it takes a lot more time to do that stuff. But then lately there's been some bug that like, a deploy will I think the situation is the deploy takes more than the 15 or 20-minute maximum, and so the timeout kills the deploy. But for some reason it doesn't actually take and fail the deploy. It just like kills everything. So
good.
there's a few weird bugs like that to fix, and they're hard to track down because you can't. It's on someone else's server and someone else's code, so you can't really just clone that and reproduce that in development very easily.
Right.
So
One thing I really like, I'm like clicking through it right now. I like how you can just pull the Rails logs up like in Hatchbox.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really nice touch.
So I didn't want you to, and a lot of these things, like, when you use Heroku, you've got to add Rails 12 factor and they redirect your logs and do a bunch of other things. Like, I just wanted your stuff to work with a blank, brand new Rails app. So I have log rotate set up so that those logs will be rotated as long as they're, the standard ones. And that's it. You don't really have to do a whole lot more to support some of the basic Rails configurations, which is awesome. And then you can just pull that stuff up in Hatchbox. But of course, there are times when, like, someone has Rails 12 factor coming from Heroku and they haven't removed it. And so it's not writing to disk anymore. And then they click on the Rails logs and they're like, where are my Rails logs? And they're like, I don't know. Like, we can't find them because they're not on disk. So it must be something you did.
Right.
And they don't realize, that was the situation. So,
I do have one like major complaint.
all right, let's hear it.
Like, I feel bad even like railing you on this podcast for it. I enabled desktop notifications and I don't have a Hatchbox logo in the desktop notification.
Oh, yeah. And that is kind of because I haven't actually. I have a logo, but it was intended to be a placeholder, and I've never actually gotten a real logo. And so, yeah, I've been like, I need to go hire a designer and get me a real logo at some point, and then I'll make sure that gets in there.
As much as I hate desktop notifications, I love them for services like this. Like, I think it's Circle CI maybe gives me desktop notifications, and like, it's just a nice touch. But I don't want like Mac Rumors desktop notifications or like
really?
Or I'm just like Googling around and I come on some like randos finance blog and they're like, enable our desktop notifications. I'm like, I'm never going to read anything else on this page. I just want this one article.
Yeah, but then we'll give you a modal pop-up when you go near the back button and then ask you, like, are you sure you don't want to, give us your email address? Then we'll have a pop-up in the bottom right corner saying, hey, do you want to give us your email address?
And let's not forget that the modal says, do you want to give us your email address? And the like submit button is yes, give me all your awesome content. I'm a wonderful person. And then the no button's like little text. It's like, I'm a terrible human being and I feel horrible about myself and I hate everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That psychology of those button wordings is, so it makes me feel so bad if I don't give you my email address, right?
Dude, it makes me so frustrated for some reason. I don't know why, that even if I like want to put my email in, I always click no. Like,
Yeah. I it just feels so crappy when people do that, that I'm always like, no, if you're gonna go that low to do that kind of thing, I'm just like, nope, I can guarantee you that you're not gonna be sending me stuff that I actually care about. Like,
right.
almost a guarantee.
Yep. But that's about it, I guess, for my Hatchbox exploring right now. Um, I have automatic deploy set up through GitHub. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it gives you a pretty similar experience to Heroku. You know, like there's not a whole lot of uh, things you have to do about setting up your server or whatever. If you want to SSH in, yeah, you do need to add like your SSH keys and whatever. But um, you know, there's some trivial differences between them, and for the most part, I tried to give you as easy of an experience as I could, given that your servers are going to be your own, and you will have the ability to do a lot more than you could with Heroku.
One other thing uh, that I really like about how you have it set up is like when you go to create a cluster, you can put everything in like one server instance. So like cron jobs, workers, database, Redis, or you have the option to like provision like all those things as individual Linux boxes with like you had like a load balancer. And when I clicked on that, I was like, man, I really want to set up all those things individually because that sounds so awesome. But then I was like, or I could just like put it all in one right now because it's we haven't released this app yet, but it's cool.
Yeah, and I mean there are some challenges when you want to go from one server to multiple, but for the most part, it's not that bad. You know, I tried to make it so that like when you modify your cluster, like hopefully you don't have to move your database to another server. So like I don't let you basically wherever your database goes, that will become your database server if you expand from one. So then your domains, you would point to your load balancer. You would change your DNS records to point to the load balancer in the future then. Like that would be your major change that you would have to do, but then you are free basically to go from one server to many, and there's not a whole lot of problems doing that. So I wanted it to be that way so that for the most part you will have minimal downtime, and you have the ability to start on a single box and then upgrade your way up. Or if you want to start higher and work your way down, you can, but that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm actually on the modify cluster. Like it's really nice. They're just all drop downs of like what roles it should have. It's so great.
Yeah, because, you know, as I was trying to define how the stuff would work, it's like, well, it's pretty complicated to try and decide how things should actually be. And everybody's going to want to have sort of a different cluster set up. So I realized, like, if I just gave you some tags and then certain tags would be important, like, for example, web, cron, and worker servers will all need a copy of your code checked out to them, but a database server, a load balancer, um, other things like that don't actually need your code checked out to it. So then I, in my deploy code, can say, boom, any app servers, which are web, cron, and background workers, those will get a new Git deployment to those. But the rest of them, they don't need to do any of that. So it ends up making it pretty flexible, and future improvements can make that just even more customizable as we go. So it turned out pretty nice. The UI for the form was like really hard to figure out. I still want to improve that some, but it's kind of one of those things where you're like, oh God, I have to ask you, especially if you're doing like a custom VPS or a set of servers that you have somewhere, you got to type in the public IP and the private IP and then their tags and the server name. And it just gets to be a massive form. And then validations are complicated on that too, because you're like, well, load balancer should be optional. Database, I guess, should be optional because you might want to use RDS or something like that. But it just ends up being complicated. So it is as good as I can currently design it on my own, but I'll definitely need a designer's help in the future to make that better.
I think it is good right now. Um, I really like this model of uh, own your own server and like through like DigitalOcean or Linode or something like that, and then like have a separate service that provisions them for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because like when I worked at an ad agency years ago, I was doing a lot of WordPress dev, and there's a service. It's called ServerPilot.io, and it
I've heard of
provisions
that.
like
Yeah.
PHP servers for you. Um, and like actually has like when you put apps on your server, like you can actually it'll install WordPress on that app. And I don't know. I just always really like it was a little bit cheaper option, but I felt like I still had more control versus like a some kind of managed solution or shared hosting.
Mm-hmm.
And like I like
Yeah.
being able to do that now with Ruby code.
Yeah. And man, I've already experienced this, but like, I was going to suggest, like, if you depend on any software, for example, like Redis, Postgres, Passenger, Nginx, those things change constantly. And basically, what you're paying for is someone to keep up to date with all of those things and their changes and their configs and everything. And then when you pay for a service like that, they make that upgrade process way, way easier. So,
Mm.
um, I've already gone through multiple times where like Passenger breaks because there's an Nginx change that they weren't prepared for. And so like I had to go do like a hot fix to install an old version of Passenger for a few days. And then once it was fixed, those people could upgrade to the latest one and everything. It's nice for you as a customer to never have to deal with these weird passenger errors or whatever else you might come across. There's constant amount of things that you'll run into like that.
The other thing that I like is I don't necessarily have like a ton of just like raw server knowledge. So like for example, like PHP when I was like doing WordPress stuff, like I didn't really necessarily feel comfortable just spinning up like a server and throwing it on the internet because I'm like I don't know how secure that thing is. And so like using services like this, like it's people who at least know how to like configure a server and like configure all the security settings for it. And I'm like, yes, take my money and do that for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of firewall rules and don't allow password authentication for SSH and all that good stuff that you need to keep up to date with, or even something as simple as like let's encrypt, adding new features or whatever. You'd have to go learn those new features, do them yourself. Like there's a lot of stuff to keep up to date with, and you're already being employed full time to go write code, and it's a whole other full-time job to go like manage a server, it feels like. So it's it can be very handy. I've found it very handy for my own apps where I'm like, oh, this is nice, I already took care of that, so I don't have to worry about it. Like one of the things I want to do very soon is migrate um, my deployments for Go Rails over to that, because I'm currently using Capistrano because I've used that for like the past 5 years, and it would just be much easier for me to use Hatchbox to make my deployments and everything. So hopefully I'll make that transition soon. But it's been fun to work on Hatchbox, but it has also been like 3 full-time jobs. It is so much to maintain.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I had more I want to talk about, but I think 30 minutes is good for this one, mostly because in 20 minutes I have a haircut. Um, but next time I want to talk something that you've like actually had in our backlog to talk about for a while, but I kind of want to talk about like code quality, best practices, design patterns, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe we should do our whole episode on that next time.
I like it. Let's do it.
So, all right.
Cool.
Well, if you are in the United States of America, happy Thanksgiving
Yeah.
tomorrow. If you are not, then happy Thursday.
And
And
then maybe some people outside the US will also. I don't know if people also get Black Friday and Cyber Monday outside the US, but maybe you'll get some discounts or something. You will if you subscribe to Go Rails.
awesome. Well, everyone, I mean, Chris and whoever's listening, have a good week, and we'll do this again next week.
All right. Have a good one, guys.